they are changing my voice. So another key part of my story that I captured pretty well in this story is them interfering with my videos, right? Changing my voice, fuming me, poison me. Think about all the roofies, all the different date rape drugs, and they're still discovering new date rape drugs. So you think that all these guys who don't necessarily work for the government come up with date rape drugs and drive all the way to Mexico to get them and so on and so forth, but you think the government doesn't come up with drugs to kind of play out political dissidence? They did. And I tell you, I think they used them on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X as well. As I'm reviewing their videos that they edited, by the way, I see the signs of covert drugging. Okay, this is something that's been going on, since at least the 60s. We look at MK Ultra, we look at the end of World War II when they started scrambling for more social control, more than ever, right? In the late 40s, early 50s, during the 50s, what have you, leading up to Martin Luther King, they were well prepared for Martin Luther King's arrival, and they were prepared to suppress and sabotage and drug as needed. Okay, and that is key here. He also killed some of his family members, and that's part of it, right? If you're a true martial artist, right, you're a true warrior, you're prepared to die for the cause, and you're prepared to have your family die for a cause, right? I'm from a long line of kings. My predecessors, my ancestors would send people off to go fight wars, and lots of their tribesmen would die. Their family members, their immediate family, their cousins, you name it. And without, at the drop of a hat, he sent them to combat. A fierce martial culture is developed, especially, as they say, on the borderlands of the Igbo tribe, as the story goes, according to what I've read. Okay, fierce. They described it as fierce martial cultures. Okay, very intense. Pressure cooker, and that's part of my heritage as well, So when somebody's, I don't think it's fair that, you see the righteousness in its pinnacle is going to be in a fierce martial culture, right? And you see that there's people who are like hippies. They're not as likely to get mad because of their genes and their way of thinking. My genes are more cultivated to be righteous, and my way of thinking is superior, right? There's a difference between being nice and being righteous. Okay? Corrupt presidents could be nice and polite and diplomatic, right? Diplomatic, quote unquote. Okay? The Prince of Darkness is a total gentleman, right? As the story goes in Shakespeare or whatever. But is he righteous? No, because righteousness is intensity. Right? It's an intense word. Godly is an intense, right? You see an angel, it's intense is the idea. And the angels aren't what you think they are. It's a story for another day. God is intense. So as you approach that state of being, as God's perfecting you, as you approach being one with God, rather, it's intense, right? Proverbs 28:1, Proverbs 4:18, right? The wicked flee that no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. And Proverbs 4:18, the path of the righteous is like the morning sun shining ever brighter to the full light of day. So we look at these stories, right? I know a lot of you probably want to hear stories about, how I used to love mint chocolate chip and chocolate chip on a plain cone. There we go. There's a nice story for you. I lived in Saratoga. I started, going to Baskin Robbins, and I'd get mint chocolate chip and chocolate chip on a plain cone at Baskin Robbins. And, yeah, I like pepperoni pizza. Oh man, did I like pepperoni pizza, right? Eventually, I started going to, Mountain Mike's, Round Table, shout out to those guys. There was an Italian family at Mountain Mike's that we were pretty well acquainted with. And at Round Table, for whatever reason, we weren't that close to the staff there. I don't know why that is, but we used to go there all the time. And I think they switched out their staff a lot, probably what it was, over there in Almaden, Via Valente Plaza or something like this, right? Love some Round Table pizza. And later on, I'd go to Via Mia and other pizza places as well, shout out to those guys and whatnot, So, I had various crushes on females growing up. One named Kristen, one named Sarah. And my brother was best friends with, more or less, with her older brother. I guess you could consider them best friends. And I had a crush on his sister. That's kind of awkward, right? And it wasn't like, because they, I hardly ever saw her after school, right? It happened at school, And, yeah, he used to have a friend named Nicholas, right? I'm not gonna say his last name. And I used to wrestle with him. He was kind of weaker than the other guy. I kind of break even with my brother's friend Alex, but his friend in his same class was littler than he was, and I'd kind of beat him at wrestling, And there's that. I used to love some tetherball. This game. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a ball in the string, and you whack it, and it kind of spins around the pole. Okay, we had a little cheap version of it at my old house, and I played tetherball, and I was very good at it. That's helped my hand-eye coordination. Basketball was a huge thing. I wanted to be in the NBA when I was younger, and it's not the end of the world that I never got that good at basketball. In some skill sets, I was the best ever in basketball. But in some total scoring and rebounding, and I wouldn't have made the NBA at my pinnacle. Okay, but certainly, if they didn't sabotage me, I may very well have. But that's not my goal, right? It's a good thing that I didn't go to the NBA. God had a much, much greater plan for me. I'm Christ, right? What the heck am I going to do in the NBA, right? So there's that occurred. I used to, have the Bruce Lee video game on like Commodore 64 or something, right? There was a Bruce Lee video game where you go up, there's different levels on the screen or something, and you're fighting with guys. And there was that, I was big on the video games, the Nintendos. I actually was one of the few people that I knew that had Neo Geo and Turbo Graphics and stuff like this. But also the Sega Genesis and the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. A cute little fact here is when PlayStation came out, right? I had the PlayStation, never got the PlayStation 2. Cute fact, right? 2, 3, 4, whatever they're at now. I never got any of those, right? I just got the PlayStation 1. So even though I had all the video games growing up, when I got older, I was spending so much money on weed, and my parents, were so invested in things, and they didn't really want to support that kind of thinking. They wanted me to hit the books. That never occurred, So everyone, their mom had PlayStation 2 and 3 and 4, and I didn't, what I'm saying? Interesting fact, right? I was big on certain video games, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2. Like, I was very much thinking like a martial artist before I started taking, Taekwondo and Kung Fu, which is also part of my story. I took those things and I really excelled in them. And, I moved on from that. And that's when around the time when I went to reform school, I stopped doing those things and went to reform school. And, yeah. So, like a lot of people, I had the Street Fighter 2 for Nintendo, whatever. We're playing all the time. I had Tekken. Loved that game to death, Eddie Gordo and Harang and martial law and so on and so forth. Okay. But I always was sad, I always was sad. And that was one of the things that characterized me in my life, right? It's like it says in Isaiah, man familiar with suffering. I'm very familiar with suffering, right? There's a lot of people who had who were starving to death that were less sad than I was. Was one thing that really distinguished me. There was no clinical depression. I know the difference. It was potent sadness for a good reason, and it was reinforced by consistent activities. I mean, I think you have to define the mental illness as something that occurs when there's no reason for it, right? You're like, why do you feel hopeless and sad for no reason? But when you think things through, right, ignorance is bliss. Wisdom is moments of sadness at least, and being in the Spirit of God gives you joy in moments of relief. But life is a struggle. And for the top martial artist, son of two doctors, a brain surgeon son, it was no exception. Being a brain surgeon son didn't give me a magic pass away from suffering and heartbreak, and away from prejudice and discrimination, and away from the pain of seeing that people are hungry out there. And if anything, it made it worse at times as I had to explain to people how, though I'm what you might consider a rich kid, though I wasn't, because the way my dad was spending his money, okay, and he's very much working class, and he's not getting paid as much as other brain surgeons. He's working harder, and there's a long story why that is. Yeah. And there's a lot of heartbreak and struggle in my story, that there's no easy way to express it or explain it. I could talk about Kimmy, this one Asian chick. She was, I thought she was very attractive when I was in San Jose State summer school. And so, I had a friend named John. For whatever reason, he didn't like her. And, everyone's giving each other their numbers after the last day of school. And so I call her up. For whatever reason, like, people give each other numbers, but she's shocked that I call her up. Like, so, everyone gives them numbers. But anyway, she went to, Bret Hart at the time. And I said, that John has a crush on her, right? Because I was, and she saw right through it like a no time flat. She's like, really? And he told me to call you and Doc, because I wanted to talk to her and I wanted to kind of see where her head at, and I wanted to try to work the angle from there because I was shy. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to let that opportunity pass. It blew up in my face, you feel me? But certainly she didn't do a Maria response where her dad's calling my dad, like, we settled the matters ourselves, and that was actually before Maria. I didn't,